usually the situation is. So the banks can expect to be losing clients, but they have to go somewhere. So,
Right.
Yeah,
good for the
I don't
credit
think there's
union.
any real reason for that. I really don't.
No. Well, but it's
I,
anytime there's fear when it comes to money, you're going to watch
Right.
people move upgrade, and all the stuff that we know about upgrade is going to come right along with it.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this is a bit problematic, though. Bank failures and increased regulation and increased cost, it's going to all flow to the consumer.
Yeah, and sooner or later, it all has to have a balancing point. I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, when they have no regulation, we've got problems, and when they have too much regulation, there's a different set of problems. But this is really what's happening, I think, out there right now in the world of testing outgrid on the change grid. If you guys can just imagine for a second, if you were plotting out at like say a balance driven driver or even an amiable driven driver out there at 9 9 or 10 10, um, you'd have to go, this is affecting a lot more than one industry. So we've recently had issues with transportation, with the trains issues. There's been some aviation sorts of things that are going on. It may very well be that the outgrid battle is happening between two outgrid parties, quite literally. And they're both at that 9 9 spot where they think they've got all the ability and they see all the challenge, and they might be overestimating their ability and overestimating or overrepresenting the challenge, which moves them slightly further outgrid, maybe even into the outgrid danger zone. And so all that outgrid stuff is happening. There's a lot of positioning and a lot of posturing and a lot of whatever. But the answer is really to find balance in the middle. All industries that are going to impact so many people's lives in so many different ways should have whatever level of regulation is necessary to ensure the safety of citizens and whatever else. At the same time, too many restrictions increases the price that people pay on everything. So nobody wants too much, and I think people are learning that neither do they want too little. Shags, you can say whatever you want. Feel free. Yeah.
I think the Fed caused the bank failure.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're
They
all
raised
players
interest
in this
rates.
drama.
They raised interest rates so high that the bank's portfolio of treasury bonds declined in value.
Yep, yep, yep,
And when they went to sell it, they suffered a loss.
yep. And the news spread, and next thing you know is we
But
have
that's what they're supposed to do, is invest their deposits in federal notes
yeah,
and
yep, yep,
bonds.
yep, yep.
They went out long term. Fed raised rates, caused the portfolio to drop, and they screwed themselves. The Fed
Mhm.
screwed themselves with it.
Yep, they
Somebody
did.
should be held responsible for that.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. But I imagine it's a whole flock of people.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the employees at SVB are basically, calling their CEO an idiot. I mean, right to the man's face, they're calling him an idiot because of some decisions that he made to make certain pieces of information widely public in the name of transparency, when he would have been wiser just to shut his mouth and let things unfold if and when they were going to unfold. So there's a whole lot of finger pointing, but to me, while that all is all going on, I'm just fascinated by the tension management aspects of it. So
Yeah,
what's
they
really
sold his
happening
block
to
of
keep
stock right before the announcement.
right? Well, and so there you go. And so um
Classic insider trading.
yeah, well, it
Martha
is
Stewart
insider
went to
trading.
prison.
Yeah, right. And so again, who that all is going to impact ultimately is a movie I'm sure we'll see at some point down the road. But I'm just fascinated about how the tension management comes into play, what it impacts, how quickly and how severely it's impacting it, et cetera. So, well,
Well,
I
it's
haven't officially started the call, but I guess I might as well. So this belongs at the beginning, but hi, everybody. It's T. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Okay, go ahead, David.
I was just going to say it certainly sent the depositors up in distress.
Right. And this is something we talked about yesterday on the Oracle, the self call, which I'm telling you is getting very advanced very quickly. And for whatever reason, I've made my peace with that. But it's it's certainly not the beginner's program I had envisioned. What can I do? So, but that's what we're talking about. It's like it moves everyone's tension up, obviously, who's actively involved in whatever the drama is. And then all the people that are just hearing about the drama also go up grid because they wonder if something similar might be headed their way. And the whole crowd, the contagion of upgrade energy, concern, well, the four upgrade emotions: anger, grief, fear, shame. This is all in play. And then what happens afterwards is equally interesting about, am I trying to soothe them, or am I trying to mobilize them so that they they walk away from banks and they stir up all kinds of whatever, which is what I think the credit unions are trying to do right now. I mean, they've already released ads saying, like, if you're tired of the chaos of the bank, come to and join a group of people who own the bank, And so it's a really interesting kind of dynamic just to witness. Yeah.
And
Anywho, oh, anything else anyone wants to throw in before I kind of get to
oh,
the,
and now they're messing with our washing machines and our gas stoves.
oh, is that right?
Yeah, no, they want to change the design of the washing machine to use less water. And all the manufacturers say it would make the clothes come out as dirty as they went in.
Well, yeah, and I've even, we had a front loader for a while, as I'm sure most of you guys either have or have had. And we just found that even though they might be saving water, the cycles are like double length or whatever. The clothes are going for like an hour or whatever.
Right.
And I'm
So
going like,
less water, more electricity.
yeah, so I don't know how that trade-off works out, but it does raise a question mark about the whole thing. And we don't have gas where we're at, so this is a fully electric area. So yeah, hence the use of solar panels. Yeah. All right, so what I'd like to do is just finish up what we've been talking about for the past few sessions about doing the change risk coaching. We've worked our way all the way through it. The only thing left to talk about is when you get to the solution part, what do you really do? And last time around, I ended by saying, well, all this stuff over here on the practical side of things, you help them come up with a practical solution using whatever skill set and resources you have available to you. I mean, if it's a practical kind of thing, then the solution should be rather straightforward. You just have to, help them lock into it or whatever. It really is the obstacles of the mind where the solutions have to become really more thoughtful, more, perhaps even more structured. So think about that. If the reason why the person isn't where they want to go is because there's some obstacles, and some of those obstacles are obstacles of the mind, which mean they're either unaware, unable, unwilling, or unsuitable, what is your solution if you've got someone who is basically has an unawareness? Now, let me do throw in one thing. I'm not talking about an unawareness of something that would fall on the practical side of things. Oh, they're unaware of the law. Oh, okay, well, fine, I get it. That's a mental thing right now, but it would have a practical solution. It's really more about their being unaware of something about themselves, maybe. They're not picking up on signals kind of around them. They're denying whatever it is that's really going on. There's something that they're unaware of, I believe, about themselves that is really the issue, not unawareness of something available in the practical world. Thoughts about that?
What do you think about downgrade maneuvers to address that?
Well, certainly, doing any kind of a solution is going to fall into one or of the categories of downgrade maneuvers. That's a fun thing to kind of look at. So
Right.
when we're talking about the stuff on the practical side of things, well, the downgrade maneuvers are normalize, simplify, restore resources, add resources. That solution is probably going to have a whole lot of simplifying things. It may very much have parts about it that are restoring resources, obviously adding resources. So I kind of feel the downgrade maneuvers already overlay on this side of things. How do they overlay on the obstacles of the mind? Let's take a look
Try
at
to
that.
get them centered.
Yeah, if I'm trying to get them centered, that's great, but that's a PowerPoint maneuver, and you're right. Obviously, if I can move a client to the PowerPoint before we start having any discussion about whatever it is that they felt compelled to have as their subject of the day, I definitely think that would alter things immediately. I will say to you that sometimes I think I want to meet the client more where they are initially, so that I hear whatever their issues, pain, upgrade stuff, whatever the upgrade stuff might be, or the outgrade stuff, if they're kind of more in that kind of mode. I kind of want to meet them where they're at, but very quickly I want to say, okay, now let's do something about this. Let's do something to get ourselves to the center of the change grid, so that we can detach ourselves from the story you've just shared, and we can critically examine it, and we can figure out where are you at, where are you trying to go, etc. So I can certainly see that I would yeah, do that over here as well. Yeah. Thoughts about that, David? Did I answer the question, or did I just
Yes, no, you did, T.
roll
I was
call?
just thinking that if somebody's unaware or well, I mean, unsuitable is a totally different story, but
Yeah.
the only way to get to them is to get them centered so that more of them is available.
Yeah, yeah, right. And I think, talk about the unawareness side of things. I think this is where we get into a lot of discussions about how people interact with one another, how they interact with themselves, where their values are coming from, how their values impact the lens through which they view the world and others around them. I think that there's a lot of that, and them being unaware of the fact that they are dealing with the world around them through these filters that for them are automatic, but are in fact things that we can dissect and explore. So I'll give you an example of this. Um, a few months back, we were talking about the Enneagram, and we pointed everybody to some online resources they could go to if they wanted to check out what the Enneagram happens to be. And Linda tested out to be a 1. And a 1 is someone who likes to really make sure that things are being done correctly. So they believe in order and organization, and that there is a right answer, there is a right way to do things, et cetera, et cetera. Well, one of the dark sides of that is that it greatly, I'm going to say, elongates, intensifies any kind of shopping activity you're doing, any kind of evaluation you're performing, because you're scrutinizing everything that's being said to see, does it match what others are saying, who's the authority, blah, 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 blah. I'm a 5. A 5 says, well, we'll figure it out, kind of just do what you already know you can do. So just do something. We'll see, and so you can see how, if someone is unaware of how their personality type or whatever is going to impact the way that they are received and perceived from and by others, then that's an area of unawareness that could literally change their way of operating. Yeah. Oh, Brian Joe joined us. Hey there, welcome, welcome. So yeah, so unawareness. Now, when I talk about helping people become more aware of the things about themselves that they are unaware of, which of the downgrade maneuvers would that be? Is that normalizing, simplifying, restoring resources, adding resources? What do you guys think?
I think it's adding resources.
Yeah, I think it's probably adding resources. I'm sure some of it, when they read the debrief, is kind of confirming things they already knew about themselves, or had hoped would be true, or are happy or true about themselves. But yeah, I think it's definitely adding a resource. And that's going to lower their level of tension. Why is it lowering their level of tension? But because, at least I hope, it's because it's helping them get answers to some of the mysteries behind their frustrations. So, for example, a type 1 gets very frustrated when the world does not conform to how that 1 would expect it to be. So there is a right way to, do whatever it is that needs to be done. And meanwhile, again, I'm a 5, so I'm kind of going like, well, this is fascinating. Let's just see where it goes. Anyway, it ends up becoming, I think, a really useful tool, because it does equip the person to recognize when they're having whatever responses they have based on their personality type next time around, and they can, take care of it a little bit better, so that they have tools, they have resources. That's solving the problem, that's lowering the tension. The second thing we do is simplify things. So, the second thing that we do is deal with issues of a lack of ability to do something. They're unable to do it. So what we end up doing then, I think this resonates very much with simplifying things. We try to turn it into some sort of a map to follow, a process, this, structure, order, organization, opportunities to learn, techniques to practice, helping someone with their ability is us going into our trainer mode. And so that's, I think that's a really kind of an what do we say, an obstacle of the mind that we're used to dealing with the clients that we've all been working with. Thoughts about that? Or where else might you put this idea about correcting a gap of ability?
Adding resource, sounds like
I'm,
resources.
I think you're right. I'm adding resources, that's for sure. And by the way, as I start to describe the things I'm doing, I'm kind of going like, yeah, but you know what? These are also correcting things on the practical side of things, So obviously there's a spillover there. The next one was that I'm unwilling to do something. I don't know that any of the downgrade maneuvers address a willingness obstacle. What do you guys think about that?
That is the toughest obstacle I run into, T.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
Well, I'm just thinking back to my client in New York who actually ended up firing their CFO or their manager of their accounting department because she was unwilling to comply. She would not work well with others. She would not interrupt or disrupt the CEO when he was presenting ideas and challenge him. She was just unwilling to do the things that she needed to do to be a highly functioning member of Team One. There are two teams. You have your Team One, your executive team, and Team Two, which is your personal team. And Team One comes first, and she was just unwilling to do what it took to fit into Team One. And there was another one who did the same thing, but she's actually changed her behavior.
Okay. And so what would you consider their obstacles at that starting point?
Just totally unwilling.
Totally unwilling. So they had all the ability necessary. They were fully aware of whatever they needed
Yep.
to be aware of.
Yep.
They just didn't feel like playing.
Nope.
Yeah. All right. And so
And that went on for a year.
right. And so if I said, I don't think downgrade maneuvers are going to help that situation.
No.
Because I kind of think along with that unwillingness, there is a movement that takes place on the change grid. So I think there's a difference between unwillingness upgrid and unwillingness downgrid, and maybe even unwillingness outgrid. So how would you guys kind of characterize the differences between how unwillingness comes into play as I move away from the center of the change grid in any direction?
The only thing I can think to do with that, T, is to try and center that person, get them to think of a time when they did comply, when they did agree and it worked out well, and why did that happen that way, and how did you feel about it, and what impact did that have on the company and everything, trying to appeal to their nobler motives.
Mm-hmm. And so appealing to their nobler motives ended up being an outgrid maneuver. Because we've often said, in fact, in the leadership program, we say that each of these four sources of human struggle and failure, those four root causes, unaware, unable, unwilling, unsuitable, they also point to a different style or a different role that we as a human development professional would need to play. And so we said, who in an organization is responsible for correcting issues of unawareness? Or issues of awareness, And that resonated very much with what managers do. Managers keep you informed about expectations. They keep you informed about staffing issues and performance issues and supplies coming in and things happening with the competition and making sure everybody's in the right place at the right time. That's a whole lot of keeping people aware of what's going on, how they're performing, how that performance is going to affect them moving forward, et cetera. So there's a lot of that goes on with that. When you go into issues of a lack of ability, obviously that's the domain of training. When you get into issues of unwillingness, that requires someone to step into the leadership position, because we do say in this whole root cause analysis thing that we do in pride-based leadership, that it is the lack of willingness that is evidence of poor leadership. So if you're a good leader, your people are willing to do something, unless their unwillingness is coming from an upgrade situation, a downgrade situation, maybe a different outgrade situation. You may get some pushback for different reasons. And this is getting a lot more, let's say, higher thought than I wanted it to go, but it's going to go back to, yeah, no, I won't go there yet. So why would someone be unwilling if they're upgrid? Brian, you're unmuted.
They're scared.
They're scared. Why are they afraid of something?
Yeah, I would.
Go ahead, Brian.
There's too much going on, so they're overwhelmed. Number one,
Mhm. Right.
and I can see that being a big difference than someone who perhaps is unwilling downgrade, where they just might be stubborn.
Yeah. All right. And so remember, earlier I said that when it comes to this whole idea about people being resistant, the question is, I think, what are they pushing back against? And I didn't want to give it away. I was just hoping someone blurted it all out. It goes back to, is the unwillingness issue a primary roadblock or a secondary roadblock? Is it a primary issue or a secondary issue? If I am unable to do something, which means by definition, my level of ability is low, my level of challenge is very high. If I am unable to do something, you shouldn't be at all surprised to discover that I'm also unwilling to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And similarly, if I'm too far down grid, where I think everything is just fine as fine can be, well, what am I really missing there? I'm missing some management input to let me know that there are things that I am unaware of that could change the whole thing. And that ends up being an upgrade maneuver. Remember, change the task, or raise the bar, change the task, awaken emotions, boost accountability. If I'm coming along as that manager input now, I'm moving it to you there. So if the fact is you're lazy, or you're unwilling, are you unwilling because you're unwilling, or are you unwilling because you're just plain bored? You're just plain disengaged with whatever it is that's going on. Yeah.
The one thing that I keep thinking about is there's not the unwillingness and not inability. That's a different scenario totally.
Yeah.
But there's a lack of a compelling why.
Right. And that is why this falls into the leadership category. People that have unwillingness as a primary roadblock are lacking in some sort of leadership involvement. You know, who hasn't helped them find the vision, the mission, the purpose, you know, make sure they're on task, awaken in them that desire to accomplish something, to help somebody else, you know, believing in them before they believe in themselves. All those leadership things is what overcomes issues of primary unwillingness. Yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Thoughts about that? Am I just making it more complicated than it needs to be?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I come back to the issue that that David was raising earlier about this person who was unwilling, and I have to wonder, what was the source of the unwillingness? What was it that person just, where was it? Was it a downgrade issue, an upgrade issue, et cetera? So
Yeah.
no, yeah.
No,
I think, Kathleen, to tell you, I think she was someone who, even after the pandemic was over and no one was wearing a mask, she would always be wearing a mask. I think for her, it was all about control.
That's a good
Okay.
observation, because I think that you've got the true resistance to a situation is interesting if you explore it along the heart line. People that are very far in grid may be very resistant to doing something, because they just don't believe in themselves enough, and they haven't had anyone to believe in them. So I can see that they might have a primary unwilling issue because they can't, they're just so far in grid, they don't have the energy. Well, what if you got two people, the boss and an underling, both of them with strong personalities, both of them outgrid, driven drivers, but they have opposing viewpoints on how to handle a given situation, or where resources are going, or priorities are being set. If you've got someone like that on your team, even though they may not verbalize the conflict with you face to face, that conflict is being played out in their head over and over and over again, and maybe shared with everyone around them. Am I
Yep.
right? Right.
And that's what she would do. She would pollute the accounting team. The CEO walked in and said, "We're going to change this," and it was going to save them an enormous amount of money, and it was going to create a little bit of effort for the accounting department, but not overwhelming. And she just went ballistic, and then was undermining the whole thing. And it was all about control. She wanted it
Yep.
her way.
Her way. That's an outgrid. Well, it's actually a,
She's a D, so
yeah, well,
that
no,
adds
no
anything.
surprise. We'd find these very driven behaviors, and she might even be sounding like her tertiary is driven as well. So a driven, or a driven driver, if we want to stick with the labels we have, a driven driver. Well, that's 11-11 and 12-12. They become really, difficult to bear. But that's not a good place to be. That's not a place of harmony. There's no amiable energy remaining. So this is a fight waiting to happen.
At an offsite, I asked them to list on a scale of 1 to 10 how much they trust the organization and how much they feel trusted by the organization. And her numbers were 5 and 3.
Oh, well, she's in the wrong place. So
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a right place for her until she does some inner work.
Well, and the problem is that she was 6 months pregnant.
Well, that certainly deserves her a nice big bowl of slack. But if that behavior existed prior to her pregnancies or continues
Oh, it
after
did.
pregnancies, well, then, you got to go like, well, it might have been involved, but tell me about the rest of the time, or whatever the case may be. I don't want to minimize the aftermath of such a trauma to one's body, but stuff happens. Okay, so as I look at that, I go, all right, well, if there's an outgrid issue, or if there is a willingness issue and it's of a primary type, I need to be more of that leader type. So doing those outgrid maneuvers, believing in you before you believe in yourself, appealing to your ego, encouraging you to step into a leadership role, giving you good coaching, mentoring sorts of stuff. That would be great. What Shag's just right. Perhaps she was still upset about that house from Kansas landing on her sister.
Great one, Shags.
Leave it to Shags.
That's one of my favorites for upset people.
Yeah, there it is. Okay, anyway, and that leaves this last one, this idea about suitability. And I think that suitability is also an issue of the heart line. And so it really is the ultimate in-grid maneuver. So think about that. If there's a suitability problem, what's actually happening in the environment? What's going on that makes you go, well, they are not suitable for this? How did we get to this label of unsuitable? Well, let me
When
start
I
with
think
this.
unsuitable, I think about hiring, and I think about, if someone tried to stick me behind a computer for 8 hours a day working on financial data or something like that, I'm unsuited for that.
Right. And hopefully there was some things they could have done early on to better describe the actual workday and assess whether or not you're a good match for that. So there are issues of true practical suitability for certain tasks to be done in every different industry, every different job. I'm sure has got its own little kind of prerequisites for you to even attempt to do such a job. But what about the unsuitability that comes along after the initial hire? How does someone become unsuitable in that situation? Kathy, you just unmuted.
Yeah, I mean, there's the unsuitability of competence. You know, are you competent? Do you have the right skill set? But there's the unsuitability around values
Okay.
and and uh, and even I hate to use this word, but even temperament when it comes to the particular culture
Yeah.
that you're in.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
I agree completely, Kathy.
it's all suitability is there a match? Is there a good
Mhm.
blend that can go on here? Now, I would say to you this, if I had an employee who was fully aware, fully able, fully willing, and fully suitable for a very, very long time, and suddenly they're in a situation or we need them to move in a situation where they feel unaware, unable, and unwilling, what might you say at a certain point to them? I don't
Yeah,
think
I'd say I think you should find some other place to
yeah,
be.
I don't think this is a suitable match for you anymore. So suitability, I just wanted to point out, is something that I believe is very contextual. So, um, like for example, none of us mind being in front of an audience, right? I mean, how many of you on the call would actually rather be in front of the audience than seated in the audience? You know?
Me.
Mhm.
Right, and we're
Yeah.
just comfortable. That comes with the profession we've all chosen. But we also recognize that fear of speaking in public is still the number one fear that people have. We can't relate to it. I guess I can understand it intellectually, but I can't resonate with it. But I would certainly say, based on how you assess yourself when it comes to whatever the skill that is required, you may be declaring yourself unsuitable, and I don't necessarily have a reason to argue with you. For
Mhm.
example, I had a client who was just the embodiment of love, but was so difficult to physically listen to that it was excruciating every time they even made a comment. They just had one of these voices and one of these linguistic styles where between every single word was this pregnant pause. And everyone just at a certain point, you just want to scream, just say something. So it
Mhm.
was agonizing. And they got invited to do a big presentation before an audience of hundreds at some, convention-y sort of thing that was going on in their industry. And we really had to all get together and say, we need to talk about suitability. I know you're the person who's in charge, but there's an awareness issue and there's an ability issue. And while I appreciate this willingness, I just don't think this is right for you. Have you guys ever been in such a situation, or
Mhm.
how would you handle such a situation?
Yeah, I think that context that you described is quite important when it comes to the suitability, because
Yeah,
I'm thinking like the root word literally means fitness, right? So how do
right,
you know
exactly.
if you're fit for something? You can do the assessment, but the experience may bring you different feedback.
That's right. Ability is knowledge, skill, and experience. And inside of that knowledge, there's got to be that self-awareness kind of piece. Now, when he had things to say in the office setting, it was all fine. Everyone knew his heart was as pure and golden as it could possibly be. And we all understood that I wouldn't say he had any kind of a diagnosed learning disability, but there was definitely something organic that was going on. For this to have endured throughout his adulthood. So we got it, and you make room for this kinds of things. But to put him in front of every industry leader being covered, et cetera, you just had to have one of those conversations. And it all went perfectly fine because he is this loving spirit and was okay with it. But sometimes you have to have these conversations with people about suitability. And that's why I say that what it's asking you to become in that situation is more of a counselor, a real mentor, a real guide, a real performance coach, not just a life coach, but someone who's actually very saying, I can love you in every kind of way, but right now we're talking about you executing on a particular skill set in a given situation that's about to happen, so we got to be talking about the actual performance, and performance coaching can get a little bit into suitability as well. Um, Okay, Shags just shared.
Yeah,
You want to
I
go?
can
Go
share
ahead.
with you.
Please do.
I was at a program where the woman was speaking, and she would make a point and then go, ah,
Oh
and then another
no.
point, and then ah. And I
Ah.
finally I raised my hand. I said, I have to leave early. And I hope you'll excuse me. And she said, why are you leaving? I said, because you sound like a car horn, and I'm a Toastmaster, and I just can't deal with this anymore. I said, you need better speaking skills because you sound like a car horn every time you pause.
Yeah,
The
she
whole
needs to
group
join
looked at me.
Toastmasters.
The whole group looked at me as I walked out. And fortunately, I was moving to California about a month
Yeah.
later. So I was resigning my position from that group as the representative member from a group that
Yeah.
it
Wow.
was just so happy. I was the best feeling of my life.
Well, you know, she needed to hear the information. We could talk about the level of diplomacy with which it was.
Oh, absolutely. But I'll tell you,
Yeah, that was rather outgrid, Shags.
Oh yeah,
I
just
was
but think
very,
about where was
very
Shags at,
outgrid.
but where were you on the grid at that point in time? He was actually very far upgrade. Think about that, because his question was, how do I rate my ability to endure this a moment longer?
Yes, I
Mm.
And
could
at that
not.
very instant, she went, ah. He stood up and left.
It was classic.
I
That's
love it.
hilarious.
I love it. I love it. I love it. But anyway, you know, go back to this. It's about being a counselor. So if there's an issue with unawareness, we need to think about stepping into more of a management role. If they are having an ability issue, a trainer. If they're having a willingness issue, leadership. If there's a suitability issue, just be prepared to be a bit of a of a of a counselor. Although I must say that Shags has just demonstrated the case for tough love sometimes. You know, it's just sometimes you have to just say what needs to be said and let the chips fall where they may. So, yeah, because you know, some people don't get subtle messages sometimes. So, you know, they can only do it for so long. It's good that we have lots of tools in our toolbox. All right, so I just wanted to review that so you guys kind of knew that you already have another depth of knowledge that can help you deal with these obstacles of the mind. And I will predict again that unless you are being pulled on for a very project-specific consulting gig, project management kind of gig, you're going to be spending a lot more time with obstacles of the mind than you're going to be spending with practical obstacles, even if it is an obstacle of the mind that will ultimately require a practical obstacle at a certain point in time. We still have to do the mind stuff first. For example, if I know they need a training program, which is a practical solution, I have to first of all make sure that their mind is aligned with the fact that they need a training program. I have to get them to be a willing participant, or what was the point? They're not ready for, they're still unwilling, in which case now I've got to be more of a leader to you know, throw in a dose of leadership input to make that happen. So we have to create a custom blend for
There
every.
are a ton of obstacles in the mind, T. I just, you know, you walk into a company and two divisions or departments are warring, and you know, their leaders are stuck, and you know, it's affecting the business, but it's, you know, the practical solution is not very practical.
Well, and it
And,
has no chance until the obstacles of the mind are brought under control.
yeah.
This is being undermined. All the real practical stuff is being undermined. So, for example, you get into businesses and you're going to see a whole new set of practical, or rather political dramas play out. So who wants to make sure that so-and-so is heard, but so-and-so isn't? Who wants to make sure that they get control over a particular project or a particular resource that's required by somebody else's project? I promise you all of that gameplay is definitely happening in a business of any sort of size. Don't think it's not happening every day in mom and pop shops. So it's everywhere, everywhere around you. And I think that's the work we all do. It's being able to identify and deal with these obstacles of the mind.
And
So
those are actually the toughest obstacles, T.
yeah, they're the real work. This is the real work. Because again, If all you have in your way is a practical kind of thing, well, you can just say to them, you're not aware of the fact that here you can do this, what, blah, here you go. It's like sometimes a practical solution is so obvious and so readily available, the person shouldn't have ever even engaged us in any kind of dialogue. I mean, it should be that self-evident. And if they do approach us, well, is that not a quick fix? That's a freebie. It's this stuff, the obstacles of the mind that require solutions of the mind in order to really resolve that. That's why we are useful beyond just the practical stuff we can bring. And sadly enough, we're also burdened with the responsibility to deal with all this internal stuff if our practical solutions have much of a hope of succeeding. Why did we take this job again? I'm confused. So, oh, we wanted to be of help, serve the world. Anyway, that leaves us with this red step. Now, the red step, you should be able to predict what direction it's going to go based on things you're observing in your client as they move through the other 4 steps. In fact, you should know what is waiting for you when you leave the yellow step and move into the red step. And unless you feel quite convinced that that person is likely to now express very positive feelings about the solution, very committed words, that they need to buy into it intellectually, they need to buy into it emotionally, all that. I mean, that's what you're hoping for. Then feel free to say, so how you feeling about what we've done here today? What do you think will happen if we, to those obstacles, if we get that solution fully mobilized, or when we get that solution fully mobilized? You should be hearing all the right things. But you may very well hear them say something like, well, something still doesn't feel so right, or I still think so-and-so is going to be the real burden. What are they basically telling you when they get into this red step? And they aren't necessarily negative in terms of just pure belly aching. An unwillingness issue would still be persisting, but for whatever reason, they're just saying, I don't know, I got a hunch about this. Something doesn't feel right. What are they telling you?
There's not a clear and effective
Mm.
solution for that.
Oh, it means there must be, we either didn't thoroughly address all the obstacles, or there's some additional obstacle that hadn't been identified yet. So we would just use that as an opportunity to go back. And if we're getting this pushback, say, well, there must be something that is at the foundation of this feeling that you're having. So tell me a little bit, because although we can't point to the organ of the human body that gathers a sixth sense kind of information, we all recognize that we have powers beyond what our 5 physical senses can explain. And I have no problem with that. We're beings of electricity. Everyone else is a being of electricity. We're not particularly well insulated. So how come your thoughts in energetic form can't be projected to someone who tuned into the right channel, might just be able to pick up on certain things that you might be transmitting in these other ways? So can we make room for that, or is that just too off the rail?
No, absolutely.
No,
Yeah, I
it's
think
part of,
Absolutely.
people do it all the time.
all the
Yeah.
time.
Exactly.
Right. It's part of who we are and how we're all
Yeah.
about. I get it. We can't prove anything, but we know that when we don't listen to that little inner voice, and again, this program ultimately starts at the Oracle, the self, and the goal is to help our clients or our followers on Oracle, the self, to realize that the simple reading that we've automated is nowhere near deep enough or robust enough to genuinely help them in their overall life setting. Hence the reason for them to reach out to one of you guys who can take them through this Oracle of the Self, or this change works kind of process, coaching process. And that's all this really is what I'm suggesting as a structure for how you intake and work with a client who's come to you with that, because ultimately the goal is to get them to keep on coming, to use the Oracle of the Self, maybe even become a member so they can have access to their own personal change grid. But ultimately you have someone who may turn to you, because again, as I've said very clearly about my own situation, and I'm going to project as either part of your current situation or it's waiting for you not too far down the road, we're winding down. We're in the winter, late fall, if not winters of our careers. And just because we might want to retire doesn't mean that we want to cut ourselves off from all the work that we've always done. It's intellectually stimulating. And if we could make some money along the way, well, why not? And so
Hmm.
I want to be able to say to you, what you're trying to do is to create some sort of passive sort of system where people become aware of who you are. Yeah, you spread the word a little bit because, don't expect the miracle, but nevertheless, it's out there, it's happening, so that you can maybe do ongoing work with one of these individuals who's involved. So get the idea? I mean, that's our
Yeah.
intention. So when they get to a situation where they are coming up with now second level objections, um, they didn't come up during the first set of obstacles, but now that the solution is in place, more obstacles are coming to play. It might very well be obstacles about aspects of the solution itself, but it may
Hmm.
also simply be obstacles that hadn't been identified. And maybe that's because during this whole process, clarity around their desired outcome should be becoming increasingly sharp. And their
Hmm.
current situation might even have a new little factoid. But wait, there's more. So this is part of the structure of my least favorite kinds of mysteries. So I used to like watching Midsummer Mysteries. That's kind of a British show. It's been on for 2 decades. Every character's been replaced on multiple occasions by now, but nevertheless, it's been around forever. And it's a weekly show in Great Britain. But get a load of this: every episode is an hour and a half long. Think
Mm.
about how the investment in that level of writing, casting, just all of the we don't film anymore, but taping of the situation. We don't even tape anymore. What's the verb? We need a verb, people. So that's
Media.
a lot. Well, now imagine you as the viewer have been investing an hour and a half per week for a very long time watching these mysteries, and you've learned two very important lessons. Lesson number one is that nobody in their right mind should ever move to the midsummer region of England because every week, one, if not more people die and so are murdered. Okay. So, right there, the real estate market for midsummer, which really doesn't exist, should just be stopped altogether. So that's lesson number one. Lesson number two is there's absolutely no reason for you to start thinking in any way, shape, or form about who's done anything, because I promise you, in every episode, within the last 10 minutes, they're going to introduce a new fact that suddenly makes all the pieces fall into place. And you would be really, really lucky to have just accidentally stumbled upon what that missing piece was. I hate that. They should give us everything we need to know, as it's doled out during the story in a logical kind of way, but don't hold back something just to make your stupid mystery come together. So I have feelings about this. Anyone want to walk me through the path? So yeah. So anyway, point is that if we can do deeper work with someone, if we can find situations where they are actually coming up with a need to recycle or flesh out more fully any step along the path, what's happening to your opportunity for an ongoing coaching or consulting sort of a opportunity?
Growth.
Yeah, it's going up. And so
Yeah.
that's what spirit is behind this whole thing. So
So do you think that, there's an element of kind of like the spiral dynamics as you go through this? Like it's not, in other words, these are not, in my opinion, steps that you just do to check off a list, right? There's some reflection that needs to happen, some thought process that needs to go into it. And as you get deeper into it, you can always reveal some more underlying things. Like I'm thinking about, are you familiar with factor analysis research?
I am.
And so, like factor analysis breaks things down to its core because like when people sometimes like when you identify a so-called problem, it's usually not the thing that you labeled is the problem. There's usually
Right.
something underneath it that's the problem. And
Yeah.
so
In
I
fact,
think it like that onion, you got to keep peeling
yeah,
back some layers.
in NLP, they say the issue is not the issue.
Mm,
So whatever someone presents initially is just based on their perceptions, and as those perceptions change, so will their understanding of their situation.
mhm,
Very good, very good. Yeah, and but to your point, yeah, you can use this for a simple transaction. So for example, if I said my current situation is that I haven't had breakfast, there's leftovers in the fridge I can immediately eat, and I'm hungry. The desired situation is that I feed myself. The obstacle is that I'm sitting down and this call needs 8 more minutes. The solution is to continue our conversation for 8 more minutes and then stand up. I feel really solid about that. Okay, so I can follow this path with even the simplest kind of transactional behavior. I don't know that it's worth the bother. I mean, you're going to do it for sure, but I don't know that you would write it all out and process it all through. But I do believe the same process is underway. In fact, remember, I've always said that I didn't contrive this order. If you observe someone making really solid decisions without a lot of wrenches being thrown in the mix, this is the pattern they tend to follow. The pattern that you may also find would rearrange these. And when we talk about the path, we talk about path dancing. What happens if these steps are taken in different orders? How does that affect the outcome? Where does it fall apart? Why did it fall apart? And the biggest reason is that because people skip the black step. So they go, oh, this is where I'm at. This is where I want to go. How am I going to get there? And they jump right past obstacle identification into some way they think will help them reach their goal. What happens as they walk down and oh, by the way, and now they feel really great about it. They think it's perfect. All right, what's going to happen as they march down that yellow brick road?
Obstacles appear.
They're going to
mhm.
go encounter an obstacle because some obstacles are real. And some obstacles are in your head, and even those might just pop up as you're walking along, whatever the solution happens to be. And so, if it's going to happen sooner than anywhere, where's the best place to put it in order for you to add an element of efficiency to your decision-making structure? Well, the obvious answer is where it is between the desired situation and any investment being made in solutions development. The
Mhm.
second most common issue, or maybe even first, I mean, I've never done research to quantify this, I'm just telling you from my own experience, is that if you start off with too much red stuff going on, then you're starting off from a very a place of greatest distortion, because now we're talking about your feelings, hunches, instincts, intuitions, beliefs, etc., and none of which is going to be complete, a lot of which may not be accurate, but is an abbreviated set of the full possibilities. And so
Mhm.
this is not a good thing to start with. Although it may trigger the process, it is not a place to spend any time dwelling. And I do have the occasional client who says, but my feelings and instincts and intuitions are part of my current situation. And it's like, yeah, if that makes you more productive, then you go ahead and give that a try. I'll wait. And so it doesn't,
Yeah,
it sends you down all kinds of tangential sorts of roads. Not to suggest there's nothing to learn when you go down the path less taken, but it's not an element. It's not adding an element of efficiency to your decision making process.
right. You know,
So,
I've been thinking about this path in terms of having lots of conversations around the idea of health span. So, in
mhm,
other words, quality of life. There's lots of studies about longevity and lifespan, but this idea of health span and cultivating personal sustainability in your life on a daily basis, because the conversation was around ageism and
mm,
how that's so easily embraced, right? Like you can get canceled for just about anything in today's popular culture, but when you talk about age, it's like people make jokes about it as if, you know, just because you get to a certain age, you have to just start decaying. And there's no
what?
research on that, right? So the ideal is, at
But
least that I see it, how this can help, and to really help people think over the long term. Like
yes.
these, you know, help these young people think about a 50 years career span. And it's hard for people to think about that, but we can live a lot longer. We're not living healthier.
Right. And so that becomes, for me, a more important question is what is the quality of the life? Because a lot of people are very much focused on longevity. Anything that can
Hmm.
make us live longer is inherently
Right.
good. To which I say, perhaps.
Exactly.
And the perhaps is really all about what's the quality and do you even feel like living that long? You know, so yeah, could people do it? Yeah, and to your question is this walking along the spiral dynamic? And so certainly all movement along the spiral dynamic is going to start with a certain group of people, whoever they are, these are our visionaries or whatever, who look at the current situation and from an understanding and appreciation of the current situation, both in its positives and its negative light, they are able to envision a better future. And as they envision that better future, they start to do gap analysis. What stands between us and our next level of evolution? And then they start going like, well, it's this, it's this, it's this. So these are the kinds of things we can do to help better impact those obstacles and the power they hold over us achieving our desired state. And then again, we're always checking in. How do we feel about that solution? How do we feel about the progress we're making with the implementation of that solution, et cetera? And so I think this is the path that is constantly inching us further and further up to the pinnacle of the spiral
Hmm.
dynamic, the spiral. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, again, I've done my very best as when it comes to putting together these kinds of tools to ensure that every tool is fully portable. So you can apply it independently. You can apply it at a lot of different levels to a lot of different situations and get benefit from doing so, regardless of where you're doing it. So again, because the spiral dynamic model makes sense, everything, and we are able to integrate that spiral model into the change grid. Everything else about the change grid should help the spiral model make even more sense.
Hmm.
That's the whole point of what we're doing. We're the circle of brilliance. We hope that some of the things that come out of our conversations help to evolve the merging of brilliance, pieces that we actually say fit because they obviously do. We've had plenty of those we've stumbled across, or things we go like, if you apply some deeper thought, this one could fit, or certain aspects of this fit very easily, and other parts of it you just go, y'all making that stuff up. So, because we go like, yeah, part of your progress and building your model was very solid, and that resonates very, very well. And then you went off on some tangent or down some path that we're just going like, no, no, that doesn't
Hmm.
that doesn't fit. Doesn't fit.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it doesn't fit. so,
Right. Right.
yeah,
I think this is the ultimate personalization, right? So it's
that's
the
what we're
story
trying to do.
about you for you, right?
That's
So
right.
it's like opposite of what some so-called self-help is, where it's like these exact steps. And I see people selling this stuff on
Yeah,
YouTube all the time, right? These are
right.
the exact steps I did. And if you follow these steps, you can do the same thing.
All right, this is your test question. So why don't most people who buy the book or watch the videos follow through and do what needs to be done?
It's not suitable.
No, it's the answer we gave you last time around. Again, we're trying. We're going like, you're such a doctor. Ah,
There's not a strong enough
Oh
why.
boy.
right, because the knowledge that a resource exists does what
Mm.
to tension?
Oh,
Lowers
Lowers
drives it
tension.
down.
lowers their tension. And
Yeah,
so
drives it
I
down.
didn't need to read the book. I bought it. My tension went down. Now the thing is no longer of sufficient tension that it gets my attention. Again, people pay attention to where they find their tension. Well, they had
Mm.
enough tension to order the book. Now they got the book and they don't have enough tension to follow through on that issue. The day will come, if that issue was truly a real issue that needs to be addressed, that it will resurface. And
Mm.
every time that issue resurfaces, it resurfaces with an angry and angrier face or an
Mm.
uglier and uglier face. It's going to continue to grow until you do something about it. And sooner or later, they'll hit a threshold. And sooner or later, they'll go, I should have read that book 7 years ago. If I'd only known this, blah, blah, blah. If I had a crystal ball, it's like we gave you a crystal ball. So, yeah, anyway, there you are. So that's part of it. So yes, Brian, to your point, if people were really truly functional, then they would make these kinds of decisions that enhance their current life and the quality and longevity of the life that lay before them. They would do that, but we don't live in a functional world. We live in a profoundly dysfunctional world, and in large part, that dysfunction is expressed in the order of these colors, these steps, becoming jumbled for people, where steps get ignored altogether, or one step receives far greater levels of intensity or importance than it really merits. So there's all kinds of problematic things going here. But can you guys imagine, as my little closing statement for today, if we could really train a sufficient percentage of humanity to follow this process whenever a decision needs to be made, what would happen to the quality of their lives as the quality of their decision making gets better and better?
Improves.
It would improve. And if they take the skill set into the relationships that they have and into the children that they are raising and into the places that they work and the places where they worship and the places where they volunteer, et cetera, what do you think happens to movement along the spiral dynamic?
Up.
Yeah,
It's
it
going to
goes
go
up.
up. There's a lot of people out there that are trying to slow that movement down, that are afraid of the old ways of doing things becoming, what do we say, tossed aside to grand harm to everyone. They're not entirely wrong. Neither are they entirely right. The people who are pushing their way up the spiral are pushing it, and that insists that changes occur. Do they push sometimes too hard, too much, too fast? Yes. And when they do, they are actually hurting our progress up there. So all parties involved, both those that are trying to move forward and those that are trying to contain. Remember the illustration we use when we talk about transactional versus transformational forces inside of a business setting or inside of an organization? It's the same thing. We need both energies. We need an energy that is insisting that we, as a culture, as a civilization, as a society, expand. And at the same time, we need to have constraints. We need to have someone saying to us, we understand that, we accept that. However, we need to do it in a way that is sustainable, a way that is manageable, a way that creates harmony instead of conflict. If we don't have those two energies, we're going to collapse. I don't care which one you favor, we're going to collapse. If we don't have anyone who's managing those two dynamics, so they have a bit of an equilibrium, they reach a point of maximum growth where they can find that harmony and do that, then our speed with which we move up that is going to be reduced. So I don't know if I've said anything of value as we talk about applying this to spiral dynamics and how it might be playing out in our society today, but there's plenty of opportunities to see how it all comes together. So
Absolutely.
with that, we're going to be done for now. Joseph, we've had a time change, my good friend. So we actually are starting at 10 a.m. Pacific, which is 1 p.m. Eastern. I don't know what time it is in the Netherlands, because do you guys change time or not change time?
Well, it's 7 o'clock now.
It's 7 o'clock in the evening now. Okay, yeah. So for you, for the next few months, we're going to be at 6 o'clock in the evening instead. I did ask Zoom to send out that notification. I don't know, guys, if you got it, where in it I basically said, ignore what Zoom is telling you. Our calls are always at 1 p.m. Eastern. 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll adjust to match that. So sorry you missed our conversation, Joseph. It will be put up on the recordings, but on Thursday, please, if you can join us at 6 instead of 7, that would be fantastic. All right. So with that, thank you everybody for joining in. We'll talk again very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.